Hey everyone, Alex here, and welcome to this Marvel Snap patch analysis that just dropped on September 20th, pretty much late in the night in Eastern Standard Time. So I'm exhausted, but the good news is you're probably energized and excited to get some update analysis on what's going on in Marvel Snap. And I mean, listen, in any card game, regardless of what it is, I mean, Hearthstone, Runeterra, Marvel Snap's no different. When there's major patch changes, the meta completely shifts, and that is what we want as players. We want constant meta updates, constant things to shake things up. You have locations that can change, you have cards that can change. There's so much that can change in Marvel Snap. It has so many moving parts that it's truly fascinating to get to see a patch drop and be a part of the immediate kind of like push towards trying to figure out the new meta all at once while everyone's jumping on. So anyways, let's go through these patch notes and discuss a few things here, and we're gonna see what we can do, see what we can figure out. Now, this is being recorded live on Twitch TV, so feel free to join us if you'd like to. There'll be a link in the description below, and if I can be more YouTuber cringe, smash the like button if you want to support the channel. It does truly mean a lot to me. It's like the only thing that YouTube cares about apparently. Anyways, this patch just dropped, so let's actually take a look at what's in it. So general game updates, and this applies to Android, iOS, and this isn't the PC version yet, but hopefully the PC version drops. I know early access is coming on Steam on October 18th. I'm sure you're all excited. General updates. We got some new emotes. That's pretty exciting there. Let's give them a hand. Some good emotes, just to get a little, positivity in the chat, maybe a little bit more chirping or something along those lines. That's absolutely fantastic. You want to see that. Matchmaking system for high-ranked players now has an increased search time, so they're less likely to be playing against bots, which is kind of a problem during beta because there's not that many people playing. And more commonly, they're going to be able to play against people. Cool. Weekly mission requirements reduced. This is really cool for the new players and for players that are kind of not new to Marvel Snap, but maybe more casual to Marvel Snap. Like, not everyone plays the game nonstop like I do, but this is one of the things that makes Marvel Snap so good. It is very pick up and play friendly, and so as a result, you're able to just play the game. You're able to just, hey, I don't want to grind Marvel Snap for the cards. I want to build a collection over time, and I only have maybe an hour a day to play or 20 minutes a day to play, and I think that these weekly mission changes are good. Because Ben Brode said himself that one of the key things about Marvel Snap is not just the competitive side, not just the gameplay side, but the collection side of things that's so important. That's what makes this game really unique. It's the variants, it's the card collection. It's like you're building a collection of really cool things, right? And so allowing casual players to get these weekly mission requirements, which immensely increases their ability to collect cards, I think is a positive change. Got some visual updates on stuff, card names visible, and then double the number of decks from 10 to 20. Now, listen, I know that there was some monetization questions around Marvel Snap, especially around the loot box thing with the Nexus events, and they got a lot of negative press. This, I know it seems like a small thing to kind of harp on, but this makes me happy because what this tells me right here, they could have charged us for that. They could have charged us for an extra 10 slots and we would have paid for it. But you know what? They gave it to us for free. And I really appreciate that. I think that's a pretty good sign of what's to come in Marvel Snap. And then of course we got some optimization. They added some haptic support, which is basically like Rumble, basically. Game resolution increases, and you can download the actual assets basically based on your network connectivity. Cool. Localization, cool. Visual artifacts. This is awesome. I'm actually really happy they did this. I'm not going to go through every one. I would like to do that at some point, but right now we're just doing a general overview. And this is great because I think the look, feel, and the style of Marvel Snap is something that a lot of people really like. And so as a result, I think that consistently upgrading the visual artifacts is a really important and valuable thing, as is the audio. So let's get into the balance updates, which is the meat and potatoes of why you're here. You want to hear my talk about the balance updates, and let's start. So Zola no longer adds copies of a card if his target was not destroyed. This is important because there were instances where Zola could basically have his cake and eat it too. Basically drop into a location, not destroy the target, but then actually replicate the target into other locations. That made him unbelievably powerful in those scenarios. This is a very necessary change. And I bet you that this was the intended kind of design in the first place, and the other way was not the intention. So this is probably Zola as Zola was intended to be played. So this is a balance update, but probably kind of like more of like a bug fix. I'm not gonna say it's a bug fix, but you know what I mean. I think it meets the intention of what the card was supposed to do in the first place. A big change. Baron on reveal. Okay, he's a 2/3 that on reveal, your opponent draws a card and you set its cost to 6. The developer comment, Baron Mordo's cost increase tends to be very inconsequential in practice, so we're bumping his effect to make up and make it more impactful. Now, there's a couple things here. So first of all, on first look, I still think this sucks, because if you hit a 6 cost, then LOL, you literally did nothing. You just got a 2/3. That's kind of sad. But if you hit a card like, you know, like a bishop, then bishop's basically useless now. If you hit a card like Khazar or whatever, if you hit a card that's a 3/4 cost that feels terrible on 6, you basically knock that card out, right? You knock that card out of the game, because they're not going to play it on 6. They're going to want to have a proper card on 6 with a big impact. They're going to want to pull out their newly buffed Ultron or whatever. No one's playing Ultron anyway, but you get what I mean. And the question is often, okay, so is this effect for Baron better than Yondu? Yondu is a 1 cost 2 power that basically deletes a card from the deck. That card simply can't be played. What's interesting about Yondu, though, is obviously he thins their deck, which makes their draw more consistent. -1 card, which, I mean, if you knock out Patriot, then you just snap and they retreat, obviously, right? There's some cards that cannot be deleted from their decks because it breaks the entire synergy. Like, if they have a Mr. Negative deck, well, I mean, they might not anymore because of what we're going to read in a second, but let's say they have a Mr. Negative deck and you knock out Mr. Negative with Yondu, they just leave the game, right? So Yondu has that, but Baron can like kind of really ruin someone's curve. So I think it's a pretty interesting change. Jessica Jones. I really like this change. Jessica Jones goes from being a 5 power to a 4/4, which on reveal, if you don't play a card there next turn, you get a 4 additional power for a total of a 4/8. This is really interesting. I like this, and I think that the developer comment is correct. You can read it yourself. I'm not necessarily going to read it to you, but I think the developer comment's correct. It was a little challenging to play Jessica Jones on 5, and I think the major thing about Jessica Jones on 5 was that the extra little bump up of power was a little suspect, because it made it so that you definitely could not play in that lane on turn 6. I mean, you definitely could play in the lane on turn 6, but you often kind of revealed that, okay, I'm probably not playing this lane on turn 6, so maybe you sneak some extra power and win that lane ultimately, right? It had some interesting counter synergy with itself, it seemed, right? But this effect on 4 is much more in line. Actually, they bring it up to Rescue, right? So Rescue can be a 4/9. So if you play a card, even if it's Nightcrawler, into the Rescue lane, she becomes Rescue becomes a 4/9, and that's pretty damn good, right? Like, you take that. Whereas with Jessica Jones, you don't have to do anything. You just don't play in that lane, and she becomes a 4/8. So I think it's really interesting, and I think they make the two much more comparable. Both have their slight disadvantage, like you have to play around them, but it makes them worth playing. And then Lady Sif purely nerfed, and it makes perfect sense. Lady Sif had to get nerfed as a 2-cost 4 with a very consistent ability to knock out. Like, people say, oh, you're hitting Apocalypse. Everyone thinks about Apocalypse, but it's not just Apocalypse. It's like knocking out Death extremely consistently. Death being a 9 power, you always hit Death in the discard deck if it's in your hand. Like, it's very consistent. If you don't have Death, you're hitting Apocalypse. Like, it is a very consistent card, and because of that, on 2 as a 2/4, like, it felt like it often had no disadvantage. So now moving it strictly to a 3 cost, I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it is a bit of a nerf to the discard decks who ultimately, I mean, Hela didn't get hit. Hela didn't get nerfed, so these cards and cards that Hela could hit got buffed, and we'll talk about it shortly. So discard's not dead by any means, but Lady Sif was probably legitimately problematic. And then you got Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative here. So a couple things. First of all, Mr. Negative goes from a 4/4 to a 4/1. That is pretty impactful. As it was, the baseline for a 4 cost is probably a 4 cost 6 power. So as it was, he was 2 power short. But the power of Mr. Negative was not necessarily in the power in the card itself, but rather in the power of the cards that you kind of use to build around it. Obviously, Mr. Negative, you know, and it actually says that right in the developer's comment that, hey, don't freak out, Negative's not dead. Because it's the cards that you play with that matter, and cards like Ronin got buffed and now have more applicable play in something like a Mr. Negative deck. So it is a huge change, but I still think negative probably has a place, and it kind of feels like Sandman. Like 4-1 feels awful to play, but if you can plan around it appropriately, suddenly you find yourself in a situation where like you have an advantage, and it is turn 4. So you're 5 and 6. You just got to make the most of it. It feels a little more high risk though. A 4 cost 1 is pretty weak, pretty weak. So we have Professor X. Lock down this location, cards can't be added, removed, and etc. So basically they're solidifying the text of the effect, and what's important here is along with this change, Professor X will now prevent cards from switching ownership like Hobgoblin. That is amazing. So now Professor X has a little more of the opportunity for you to take like that big risk play where you just throw them in there and you just pray, right? Like it's a pretty cool change, right? It's not so much a buffer change. It's just, it really kind of, much like before, like we were kind of talking about Zola, right? Like this kind of, I think, is like the intended purpose. It's not so much a buffer change, but rather it's like, it's now just the card really focusing in on what the identity was supposed to be in the first place and locking that down. No pun intended, pun intended. Okay. The pun was intended. Anyway, Spider-Man getting a +1 buff, a little too weak. Thor going from a 4 cost 6, which I said once again was like kind of the average, to being a 3 cost 4, which gives him more of an opportunity to draw Mjolnir. Now that's pretty interesting because in my head I thought that a bigger advantage was playing him on 4, playing Jane Foster on 5, and pulling the Mjolnir for free, because then you still get your draw, right? Unless you draw Mjolnir anyway. But this, like, is Mjolnir a dead draw? I don't know. If your hand, like, you'd have to try to like have a hand, because if you're going turn by turn and drawing, if like you're a little short on cards, then pulling Mjolnir probably feels like game losing, right? If you don't have a good 5-6 play. If you're hoping that you draw your 5 or your 6 and you pull Mjolnir, you're probably super sad. So I wonder in practice how this actually plays. I'm not convinced it's good, but I've been wrong in the past. To me, it seemed like Thor really shined with Jane Foster in combination, and I think this suggests that you don't need to play Jane Foster with Thor. I mean, obviously Jane Foster was primarily being played in negative decks of all things, right? But this is a weird one, and I'm not convinced this is overall great, because I still think drawing Mjolnir might feel terrible if you don't have the cards you need in your hand. Obviously, if you're playing like Adam Warlock or Crystal or whatever, then I mean that's different. But then again, you're playing those cards which are kind of super not meta, and just to play around Thor as a 3, like I don't know. This change is weird. I'm not sure what to think about it. And then we got this here. We got a plethora of 5 cost card updates, and this is pretty neat, and I agree with this. Abomination +1, Arrow +2, Black Bolt +2, and then you have Blue Marvel. This is probably the biggest. Goes from a 6 cost 4 to a 5 cost 3. That is wild, because, and the effect remains the same, the +1 across the board. That's wild to me, because Blue Marvel, the 4 was never meaningful anyway. Like, his power was never meaningful, but getting him out earlier makes him so much stronger, because now you can play him with an additional card. And this is like, for instance, Doctor Doom buffed, right? Because now you can Blue Marvel, Doctor Doom. It was literally the deck I was playing before I recorded this video, and I thought it was really cool. This is a huge change. The Blue Marvel change is very significant. Make no mistake, it's very significant. So I'm really interested in seeing that in play, and we're going to be making videos on that for sure. Devil Dinosaur goes from a 4-0 to a 5-3. I like this change, because what I think this does here is that with Devil Dinosaur, you had really high highs and really low lows, and this kind of stabilizes Devil Dinosaur's kind of like position in the game, while also not making it that much better for somebody like Mr. Negative, right? So anyways, actually I just realized they didn't say Ronin. Ronin's missing from the patch update here. Ronin was also changed. It's not in the patch notes here. Ronin was changed. He is now a 5 cost 0 that gets +3 ongoing for every card in the opposing hero's hand. So that is, oh, he's right here. Sorry, he was a 4 cost. I thought they skipped him. He's right here. Never mind. I'm wrong. I should just read ahead. Gamora is now a 5-7 with a non-reveal. Your opponent If your opponent played a card here this turn, +5 power. Now, the Guardians of the Galaxy in Marvel Snap, these units like Rocket Raccoon, Groot, and Gamora, and etc., they all focus around the predictive ability for you to predict where the opponent is going to play their cards and to benefit from it. And I think I like that identity. And I do think Gamora was terrible. So this minor buff here, I think, makes her much more playable, because if you land it like that, it's a big deal. You play a 5-cost card. These 5-cost cards are supposed to be impactful. If you land that guess, she's huge, right? She's huge. So, I mean, it's worth it. It's worth that gamble. There's a payoff. There's a risk and reward that didn't exist before. So Gamora, I like where she is. And then you have Klaw, buffed. Klaw now provides 6 additional power to the location to the right. I like that. I like that. Before it was 5. I mean, now it's only +1, but how many games have you lost by 1 point? So, it's worth it. Red Skull becomes a 5/15, still the same effect on the other side. Ronin, we just spoke about already. And Spiderwoman, I'm actually super excited about this. Let me talk about Spiderwoman for a second. So Spiderwoman was a 4/4 prior, and when you reveal Spiderwoman, she provides a -1 to all the units on the enemy side of the board, and that's not bad. Okay, I splashed Spiderwoman into a couple decks, but she always felt awkward, and now she's a 5/7, and I think that this is really important. Now, we were talking about this with Twitch chat just prior, and with a 5/7, not only is the power better, obviously a 7 drop is significant, but I think the board is more developed, and I think this is what makes Spiderwoman so much better. The board is now so much more developed, which allows you to basically play the card into a more established location to maximize the on reveal effect of the -1, because on turn 4 the board was less developed, so it was harder to make that predictive choice on where to put your card to maximize the on reveal effect, and it often whiffed. And now the board being more developed allows you to make a much stronger and more potent decision with how you utilize Spiderwoman. It makes you want to actually play her, and I think that's something that was missing before, so this is a very good change. And then finally, we have the 6-card cost updates. Also, something that's missing here. No, it's not missing. I was going to say Abomination was changed. Good. 6 cost cards. Agatha. Power up by 1. The Agatha decks are pretty fascinating. The idea that, like, it's just you're botting your deck, basically, is pretty funny. But the win rate sucks. Surprise, surprise. And maybe a little extra power out of Agatha on turn 6, coming out on turn 6, maybe allows you to get a little more benefit. Hulk. A +1 to Hulk, and this is a shadow nerf to America Chavez. I mean, like, if you think about it, Chavez is a 6/9, right? And it's very consistent, thins out the deck, that's all good, but now Hulk is a 6/12. That's significant. That's a significant difference. And so, like, if you're like, I just want a strong drop on 6, I mean, you often lean towards someone like Chavez, but now, like, you got the Hulk. That's pretty good. Right? That's pretty good. So I think this is a really interesting change. It's like Hulk, Magneto, like, because Magneto usually works for you. Obviously, you have like Fist Tower or something like that, but Magneto could also ruin you a little bit, right? So it's really interesting what they've done here to these cards. And Onslaught getting a +1 as well to go 6/7, but you really want him for the ongoing effect, of course. Spectrum becoming a 6/5, which is just enough to help her, but really Spectrum's all about buffing your entire kind of board, right? Not so much herself, but the 1 is beneficial. And Ultron, I still think Ultron probably sucks, but let's not forget what makes Ultron good is the Blue Marvel buff. Blue Marvel can now be played in conjunction with Ultron. So now we have a situation where Ultron isn't pure garbage, isn't complete pure garbage. So I think that's really fascinating. And if, I'm sure there's gonna be Ultron, Patriot, Blue Marvel style kind of experiments. I don't know, there's hope. It's a new patch. Anything can happen. And we got some location updates and some patch fixes, which are a little less exciting, but more or less that wraps up this Marvel Snap patch analysis. And once again, if you liked it and you want to check us out on Twitch TV, the link is down below, and I appreciate your support by press the like button. But I mean, if you're listening to this, you supported me anyway, you watched the video, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and a very special thank you to all of our wonderful subscribers. We will see you in the next Marvel Snap video.